Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime History Relaxing. Tonight we step quietly into a narrow street somewhere in 1400s Europe, where the air is cold, the sky still dark, and a faint glow leaks from a single low doorway ahead of you. You can smell it before you fully see it. Warm bread, wood smoke, a hint of damp stone. It feels comforting, almost inviting, and yet as you draw closer, you realize this is not a gentle morning ritual. This is work. Hard, constant, unforgiving work. And you, for better or worse, are about to become part of it. You probably would not survive this for very long, at least, not without sore muscles, burned fingers, and a deep respect for anyone who does. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, share your location and the time where you are right now. Now dim the lights, you are already awake. Not gently, not gradually, but suddenly, because there is no luxury of sleeping in. The world outside is still wrapped in darkness, but your day has begun. You lie for a moment on a thin mattress, aware of the cold pressing in around you. The kind of cold that settles into stone walls and stays there waiting for your bare feet to find the floor. You sit up. Your body feels heavy, not from rest, but from yesterday. The work never really leaves you. It lingers in your shoulders, in your hands, in the quiet stiffness of your back. Still, there is no hesitation. You know what happens if you are late. The town wakes hungry and bread does not wait. You stand dressed quickly in rough linen and step out into the narrow street. The air bites sharper than you expected, carrying that familiar mix of smells that defines a medieval town. Damp earth, animals, ash, something sour drifting from a nearby alley. It is not unpleasant, not entirely, it is simply normal. A widely accepted understanding of life in medieval Europe is that most skilled trades began before sunrise, especially those tied to food. Bakers in particular had to prepare bread early so that households could collect it while the day was still young. You are part of that rhythm now, whether you like it or not. You move toward the bakehouse. It's not grand, it never is. A low building of timber and stone, its doorway worn smooth by years of use. Inside, the darkness shifts slightly, broken by the faint glow of embers that never truly go out. That is one thing you quickly learn. The oven is always waiting. You step inside. The warmth greets you first, though it is not yet strong. Just enough to soften the cold clinging to your skin. The space smells of old flour smoke and yesterday's bread. It is thick in the air, almost comforting, though it carries a weight of expectation. There is already someone there. Of course there is. A figure moves near the oven, stirring what remains of last night's fire. You recognize the shape before the face, the master baker. He does not greet you. He does not need to. The work itself is your greeting. You move to your place. There is no instruction given because none is needed. You begin gathering what must be prepared. Sacks of flour heavy and slightly damp from the air. Wooden tools worn smooth by years of handling. A bucket of water that feels almost icy when you touch it. You pause briefly, your hand resting on the edge of the table. This is where your day truly begins. There is a quiet agreement among historians that medieval bread was not a single thing, but a wide range of products depending on region, grain quality, and social class. Some loaves were coarse and dark, filled with barley or rye. Others, reserved for wealthier customers, were lighter, made from finely sifted wheat flour. You will come to know these differences not as abstract ideas, but as textures beneath your hands. For now you focus on the fire. The oven must be brought to life. You move toward it, feeling the warmth grow stronger with each step. The interior still holds heat from the previous day, but not enough. Not yet. You add wood, carefully arranging it in a way that encourages the flame to catch without smothering it. There is a rhythm to this. Too much wood and the fire chokes, too little and it fades. You learn quickly that success here depends less on rules and more on attention. Watching how the flame moves. Listening to the quiet crackle as it takes hold. You crouch, slightly feeding the fire. Your face warms while your back remains cold. It is an odd balance, one you will feel every morning. There is an old and somewhat unusual tidbit that circulates in certain regions of medieval Europe, suggesting that some bakers believe the mood of the baker could influence the bread. A calm mind, they said, made for better loaves, while anger or distraction might cause the dough to fail. Whether this was belief superstition or simply a way to encourage discipline is not entirely clear. You glance briefly at the master baker. His expression gives nothing away. Calm or not, the work continues. The fire grows stronger now, the glow deepening into something steady and alive. You can feel it on your skin, a slow spreading warmth that begins to push back against the lingering chill of morning. You stand. There is no time to admire it. Already the next task waits. You return to the table where the flour sits in quiet expectation. You open the sack and a faint cloud rises, catching what little light exists in the room. It settles, slowly dusting your hands, your sleeves, the surface of the table. You measure by instinct, not with scales, not with precise markings, but with practiced familiarity. A certain amount judged by sight and feel. This is how it is done here. Some scholars continue to discuss how standardized measurements truly were in small medieval bakeries. While official weights existed in many hands, daily practice often relied heavily on experience and habit rather than exact calculation. You add water, cold at first touch, then less so as your hands adjust. You begin to mix slowly, deliberately, bringing the flour together into something that will soon become dough. It is quiet work, not silent but steady. The sound of your hands moving through the mixture, the faint crackle of the fire behind you, the occasional shift of wood, the soft thud of tools being set down. Outside the world is still dark, but not for long. You feel it before you see it. A subtle change in the air, a softening of the darkness that hints at the coming day. The town will wake soon, doors will open, voices will rise, and they will come here expecting bread that is warm, ready, and worth the coin they carry. You press your hands deeper into the mixture. It begins to resist slightly, now forming, taking shape. Your work has begun, and it will not stop. The dough begins to come together beneath your hands, heavier now, less willing to shift without effort. You press forward, folding it in on itself, feeling the texture change slowly from loose and uneven into something more unified. It resists you at first, then yields, then resists again. There is a quiet conversation here between your hands and the mixture, one that no one explains to you in words. Behind you the fire continues to grow. You can feel its presence even without turning. A steady warmth spreading across the room, pushing the cold further into the corners. The master baker moves near the oven, adjusting the wood with careful movements that seem almost absent of thought. He has done this for years, perhaps decades. His body knows the timing better than any clock. You keep working. Your fingers press, fold, turn. There is a moment, brief but noticeable, when the dough changes character. It becomes smoother, more elastic, holding together in a way that feels right even if you could not fully explain why. You recognize it not as a perfect result, but as a necessary one. Good enough to continue. A commonly accepted detail of medieval baking is that yeast, as you might think of it today, was rarely measured or isolated in a controlled way. Instead, bakers relied on leftover dough, sometimes called a starter, which carried the natural agents needed to make the bread rise. This means every batch connects quietly to the one before it. Yesterday's bread helping today's take shape. You reach for a small piece set aside. It's slightly sour, to the smell dense and already alive in its own quiet way. You work it into the new dough, pressing it through, blending old and new, until there is no clear boundary between them. The continuity matters, even if you do not yet fully understand it. You pause for a moment, flexing your fingers. Already there is a faint ache building in your hands. It will grow. You know this now. The day has only just begun and your body is already keeping count. The master baker glances in your direction, not unkindly but not gently either. There is always more to do. You divide the dough into portions, estimating size with a practiced eye. You are still developing. Some will be larger, meant for families. Others smaller, intended for individuals or those with fewer coins to spare. Each piece must be shaped, prepared and timed so that the oven can be used efficiently. Timing is everything. You move to the side table where the surface is dusted lightly with flour. Each portion is rolled, folded, shaped into rough forms that will later become recognizable loaves. Your movements are not yet smooth, but they are improving. Less hesitation, fewer pauses. The room grows warmer. The fire has reached a point where it no longer needs constant attention. Instead, it demands respect. The heat radiates outward, touching your face, your arms, the back of your neck. You begin to feel the shift from cold discomfort to something more intense. Not unbearable, not yet. There is an interesting and somewhat lesser-known practice recorded in certain towns where bakers would mark their loaves with small cuts or symbols to identify their work. These marks were not decorative in the modern sense, but practical, helping distinguish one baker's bread from another when ovens were shared. You take a small blade and score a simple line across the top of one piece, not out of artistry but necessity. Each mark matters. Each loaf must be recognized. You step back slightly, looking over what you have prepared so far. These shapes are uneven, some slightly larger than others, a few not quite symmetrical. You notice these things now in a way you would not have before. You are learning, slowly but certainly. The first batch is ready for the oven. You carry the shaped dough toward the heat, feeling the temperature rise with each step. The master baker stands aside just enough to allow you access, though his presence remains close watchful. You hesitate for the briefest moment, not out of fear, but out of awareness. This is the point where preparation becomes outcome. You place the loaves carefully inside using a long wooden peel to guide them into position. The heat rushes outward as the oven door opens, a sudden wave that makes you blink and turn your face slightly away. It is stronger than before, more immediate. You slide the loaves in one by one, then you close the oven. The change is instant. The intense heat is sealed away, though its presence lingers in the air. You step back, exhaling slowly, only now realizing you had been holding your breath. There is no timer, no clear signal, only experience. Historians continue to debate how bakers judged baking time with such consistency, especially in an age without modern tools. Some suggest that colour, smell, and the sound of the crust when tapped played a role. Others believe that timing was learned through repetition so deeply ingrained that it became instinct. You stand near the oven listening. There is a faint sound from within, not loud, not obvious. A subtle shifting, a quiet transformation as the dough begins to change under heat. You wait, but waiting does not mean resting. Already the next batch must be prepared. You return to the table, your hands moving again into flour, water, and motion. The rhythm begins to settle into you now. Less thought, more flow. The tasks connect, one leading naturally into the next. Behind you the first loaves bake. In front of you the next ones begin. Outside the sky has started to lighten. Not fully, not yet, but enough that the darkness no longer feels complete. A faint grey presses against the edges of the small windows, hinting at the day that is coming, whether you are ready or not. You pause for just a second, glancing toward the dim light. The town will wake soon. And when it does, they will come expecting warmth, consistency, and something as simple and essential as bread. You press your hands into the dough once more. The work continues, and there is no space between one task and the next. Your hands move more steadily now, though the effort has not lessened. The dough beneath your palms feels different with each batch, sometimes softer, sometimes stubborn, depending on the flour, the water, even the air itself. You begin to notice these changes without fully realizing that you are learning. It settles into you quietly the way early light settles into a dark room. You press forward. Fold. Turn. Again. There is a rhythm here that your body starts to follow. Not fast, not rushed, but continuous. If you stop too long, the dough cools and stiffens. If you rush, it tears, refusing to cooperate. You find a pace somewhere in between, guided more by sensation than thought. A well-known observation about pre-modern baking is that recipes were rarely written in precise terms. Instead, knowledge passed from one pair of hands to another through demonstration and repetition. You are part of that chain now, even if no one has formally told you so. You lean into the work. Your shoulders begin to warm, then tighten. Your fingers press deeper, stretching the dough outward before folding it back. There is a slight stickiness that clings to your skin, a thin layer that refuses to let go until you dust it lightly with flour. It feels endless, and yet it is only the beginning. Behind you, the oven breathes heat into the room. It is stronger now, more constant. The earlier chill has vanished, replaced by a warmth that settles into your clothes and rests against your skin. Your face feels flushed. A faint sheen of sweat forms along your neck. You do not wipe it away. There is no time. You shift your stance slightly, adjusting your weight from one foot to the other. The floor beneath you is uneven, worn down by years of movement. You feel it through your shoes, the subtle dips and ridges that mark where countless steps have been taken before yours. You continue kneading. A small crackling sound reaches your ears from the oven. Not loud, but enough to remind you that the first batch is changing inside, expanding, hardening, becoming something that others will soon hold in their hands without ever seeing this part. There is something almost hidden about your work, essential yet unseen. You pause briefly, pressing your thumb into the dough. It springs back slowly, not immediately, not completely. You do not know the exact reason why this matters, but you recognize that it does. The dough is ready for the next step. You divide it again, each portion separated with a quick motion, then shaped with more care. Your hands guide the edges inward, turning loose pieces into rounded forms. Some come together easily, others require more attention, more patience. A curious detail sometimes mentioned in regional accounts is that bakers would occasionally sing or hum while kneading, not for entertainment but to maintain rhythm. The steady repetition of sound helped guide the movement of their hands, creating a kind of unspoken timing. You do not sing, not today, but you can understand why someone might. The repetition is constant, almost meditative. You line the shaped dough along the table, each piece spaced just enough to allow it to rest. They sit quietly now, their surfaces soft, slightly uneven, carrying the marks of your hand. You take a breath, not deep, not long, just enough. The master baker moves past you, his presence close enough that you can feel the shift in the air. He does not stop, but his gaze passes over your work. It lingers for a moment on one of the loaves, then moves on. No comment. In this place, silence often means acceptable. You return your attention to the next batch. There is always another. You reach again into the flour, your fingers coated, now the texture familiar. The motions repeat, but they do not feel identical. Each time there is a slight adjustment, a small correction. Your body is learning to respond without needing to think. Historians still argue whether the physical strength required for kneading was the primary skill of a baker, or whether the true expertise lay in judgment and timing. Watching your hands now, you begin to suspect it is both. Strength without awareness leads to rough, uneven dough. Awareness without such strength leads to incomplete work. You need both, and you are building them one motion at a time. The air in the bakehouse grows thicker, not unpleasant, but full. Flour dust hangs lightly, catching the dim light that now filters through the small windows. Outside, the sky has shifted from deep grey to something softer, a pale hint of morning pressing against the horizon. You notice it without turning. The world is waking. Soon there will be voices, footsteps, coins placed on wood, but for now there is only this. Your hands, the dough, the steady heat. You wipe your palms briefly against your apron, leaving faint streaks of flour behind. The fabric is already marked, already worn from use. It will never be truly clean again. You reach for another portion. Press, fold, turn. There is a moment when your arms begin to feel heavy, the effort no longer as smooth as before. It creeps in slowly, almost unnoticed, until you realize that each movement requires a little more energy than the last. You adjust again, shifting your weight, leaning slightly forward, finding a way to continue without stopping. Stopping is not an option. Not here. You glance once more toward the oven. The time is approaching. You step closer, the heat intensifying as you near it. Your face warms quickly, your eyes narrowing slightly against the brightness within. You take the wooden peel, positioning yourself carefully. This part still feels uncertain, but less so than before. You open the oven. The heat rushes out stronger now, carrying with it the smell of baking bread. It is richer than before, fuller, with a depth that was not there when the dough first went in. You slide the peel beneath the loaves. One at a time you draw them out. Their surfaces have changed completely, firm, lightly browned. The cuts you made earlier have opened slightly, revealing the expansion beneath. You set them down. The sound they make against the table is solid, reassuring. You tap one lightly. It responds with a hollow tone. You do not fully understand why that matters yet, but you remember it. A detail stored quietly for later. You step back, looking over the finished loaves. They are not perfect, but they are real. They will feed someone, and already behind you more dough waits. The cycle continues, without pause, without end. You carry the first finished loaves toward the front of the bakehouse where the doorway opens to the street. The light outside has shifted again, no longer grey but softly pale, as if the day is unfolding in careful layers. The town is waking now, not all at once, but in small, steady signs. A door creaks open somewhere nearby. Footsteps pass over uneven ground. A voice calls out low and brief. You place the bread on a wooden surface near the entrance, arranging the loaves so they are easy to see, easy to reach. Their warmth rises faintly into the cool morning air, and for a moment you notice how different they feel now, compared to the dough you held earlier. Firm, finished, ready to leave your hands. You do not have long to observe. The first customer arrives. He steps in without hesitation, as though this moment has been waiting for him as much as for you. His clothes are simple, worn at the edges, carrying the marks of daily labour. He nods once, his eyes already moving toward the bread. There is no greeting beyond that. No need. Bread is not a luxury here. It is expected. A widely recognised feature of medieval town life is that bread formed the foundation of daily meals for nearly everyone, regardless of stature. For many it was eaten at every meal, sometimes in forms that doubled as both food and utensil. What you place on this table will not be admired for long. It will be consumed quickly and without ceremony. You reach for a loaf. He watches closely. Not suspicious, but attentive. You can feel it in the way his gaze lingers on the size, the colour, the shape. These details matter more than words. A loaf that appears too small, too dark or uneven might raise questions even before a single coin changes hands. You hand it to him. He weighs it briefly in his palm. There is a pause. Then he nods again, placing a coin on the table. The exchange is complete. He leaves as simply as he arrived. You barely have time to reset your hands before another figure appears. This time a woman, her steps quicker, her eyes sharper. She carries a small basket already lined with cloth. You notice the way she scans the bread, comparing, selecting, judging without speaking. You offer a loaf. She does not take it immediately. Instead she gestures slightly toward another. You adjust. Pass her the one she prefers. She presses it, gently testing its firmness, then gives a short nod of approval. Coins follow. The loaf disappears into her basket. Gone. Just like that. There is a subtle tension in these exchanges, one you're only beginning to understand. It is not hostility, not quite, but it is not relaxed either. People depend on this bread. They expect it to be worth what they pay. There is an old and somewhat peculiar belief recorded in certain regions that customers would sometimes suspect bakers of hiding defects inside loaves, especially if the crust looked too perfect. Whether this suspicion was common or exaggerated remains unclear, but it hints at the fragile trust between baker and buyer. You glance briefly at the remaining bread. It must speak for itself. More people arrive. A young boy sent on behalf of a household clutching coins tightly as if afraid they might disappear. A labourer with dust on his boots. His movements slower, his expression tired even this early. A pair of servants who speak quietly to each other, while choosing their voices low but purposeful. The pace increases, not rushed but steady. You move between the table and the oven, between finished bread and rising dough. Your hands begin to shift from one task to another, with less hesitation now. Take a loaf, accept a coin, turn her, check the next batch, adjust the fire, return. The rhythm grows. You hear more sounds outside, wheels rolling over stone, voices calling across the street, a distant animal sound that blends into the morning noise. The town is fully awake now, and it is hungry. There is a recurring discussion among historians about how strictly prices and weights were regulated in medieval towns, particularly for essential goods like bread. Some argue that enforcement was rigid and frequent, while others suggest that daily practice allowed for small variations depending on circumstance and oversight. You can feel the weight of that uncertainty here. Each loaf must be right, or close enough that no one questions it. A man pauses longer than most. He turns the bread slightly in his hands, examining the crust, the shape, the size. His brow tightens just slightly, as if measuring something unseen. You wait, not impatiently, but carefully. He finally nods, though less firmly than the others, and places his coin down with a soft but deliberate motion. You exhale quietly. These small moments matter. More than you expected. You step back briefly, your eyes scanning the table. Fewer loaves now. The space where they rested earlier has begun to open. But behind you more are coming. You return to the oven. The heat greets you again, stronger than before, pressing against your skin as you open the door. The next batch is ready, their surfaces rising, their colour deepening. You slide them out with practice care. Set them down, turn back, always moving. There is a sense growing slowly that you are part of something larger than just this room. Each loaf passes from your hands into the lives of others, becoming part of meals you will never see, conversations you will never hear. It is a quiet connection, but a constant one. A lesser-known detail from some town records suggests that bakers often recognize their regular customers not by name but by habit. The way they chose bread, the time they arrived, the coins they used. You begin to notice this too, the quick decision of one, the careful inspection of another. Patterns emerge, without effort, without intention. You adjust the arrangement of the remaining loaves, making them easier to reach as the flow of customers continues. Your movements are smoother now, less deliberate, more natural. You do not think about each action. You simply perform it. A brief lull appears, not silence, but a moment where no one stands at the doorway. You take a breath, longer this time. Your hands rest briefly against the table, feeling the solid wood beneath your palms. It grounds you, if only for a second. Then footsteps return. The cycle resumes. There is no clear end to this part of the day. It fades gradually as the urgency of early morning gives way to the slower pace of midday. Fewer customers, longer gaps. A different rhythm begins to take shape. But for now you remain here, between oven and doorway, between heat and cool air, between making and giving. The town continues around you, and you continue within it. The pace shifts almost without you noticing. The early rush fades into something steadier, less urgent, but no less demanding. The doorway no longer fills as quickly, and the gaps between customers stretch just enough for you to feel your breathing again. Not fully rested, not relaxed, but aware. You stand near the table, adjusting the remaining loaves, turning them slightly so they present well. Habit is forming here. Small movements repeated until they no longer require thought. Behind you, the oven still holds heat. Always. You glance toward the master baker, who now stands closer to the front than before. His attention moves between the bread, the street, and you. There is something different in his posture now. Less about immediate action, more about oversight. This part of the day belongs to judgment. A well-documented aspect of medieval baking life is the presence of guild regulations, especially in larger towns and cities. Bakers were often bound by strict rules governing the size, weight, and price of bread. These rules were not optional. They were enforced sometimes publicly, sometimes harshly. You feel that pressure now, even if no official stands in the doorway. The bread must be right, not perfect, but acceptable. A man approaches slower than the earlier customers, his clothing a little finer, his posture more upright. He carries himself with a quiet authority that does not need to be announced. His eyes move over the loaves with careful attention. You sense it immediately. This is not a casual purchase. You reach for one of the better-shaped loaves, its crust, even its colour balanced. You present it without speaking. He takes it, weighing it more deliberately than others have. His fingers press lightly against the surface, testing the firmness. His gaze flicks briefly toward the master baker, then back to the bread. There is a pause, long enough to feel. He nods, though only slightly, and places down more than a single coin. Not generously, but appropriately. He leaves without a word. You exhale slowly. The master baker says nothing, but you feel the approval. It is subtle, and it matters. There is a recurring point raised in historical studies that guild systems were designed not only to regulate trade, but to protect reputation. A baker who consistently produced poor bread risked more than lost customers. He risked fines, penalties, and damage to his standing within the community. You begin to understand that this work is not only about making bread, it is about maintaining trust. You turn back toward the oven. Another batch is ready. The motion is familiar now. Open the door, feel the heat rush outward, slide the peel beneath the loaves. Draw them out carefully, set them down. Each step connects to the next. No hesitation. A faint crack appears on the surface of one loaf as you place it on the table. Not large, but noticeable. You pause your eyes, lingering on it. Is it acceptable? You are not sure. The master baker steps closer, his presence quiet but immediate. He looks at the loaf for only a moment, then gives a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Not for the sale, you understand. Without question, you set it aside. Loss is part of the process. A lesser-known detail from certain town records suggests that imperfect loaves were sometimes kept for the household or sold at a lower price rather than discarded entirely. Waste was rarely tolerated, but neither was poor quality presented as fair trade. You place the flawed loaf near the back, out of sight. The next customer arrives and your attention shifts again. A woman with a covered head and steady hands. She chooses quickly without inspection as if she already trusts what she will receive. You hand her a loaf and she accepts it without pause, placing coins down with a smooth motion. Trust once earned moves faster than doubt. You begin to notice these differences more clearly now. Some customers inspect carefully, weighing each choice. Others move with confidence, relying on previous experience. Both require consistency. Both require you. The room feels warmer now than at any point before. The heat from the oven has settled into the walls, into the floor, into your clothes. Your skin feels constantly touched by it, a steady presence that you no longer react to as sharply. But it is there, always there. Your shoulders ache more noticeably now. The earlier stiffness has deepened into something heavier, a quiet fatigue that sits beneath your movements. You adjust your posture slightly, rolling one shoulder then the other. It helps. A little. There is an ongoing academic discussion about whether medieval guilds truly protected workers or primarily served to control competition. Some scholars suggest that they offered structure and support, while others argue that they reinforced strict hierarchies that limited opportunity for those lower in rank. You feel both sides of that question here. The structure gives order, but it also demands obedience. You glance again at the master baker. His authority is clear and unquestioned. A boy enters, younger than the one before, his movements hesitant. He looks at the bread, then at you, then back again, as if unsure of what to do. You offer a small nod, encouragement without words. He steps forward, pointing to a loaf rather than speaking. You take it, hand it to him gently. His grip tightens around it as though it might slip away if he's not careful. He places coins down slightly unevenly, then gathers the bread close to his chest. For a moment he lingers, then he leaves. You watch him go, only briefly. There is always more to do. You return to the table, adjusting the remaining loaves once more. The number has decreased again, though not as quickly as before. The urgency of early morning has passed, replaced by something steadier, more measured. But the work does not slow. It simply changes shape. You move back toward the dough. More weights. Always more. You press your hands into it, feeling the familiar resistance, the texture that now feels almost expected. Your movements resume their rhythm, though your arms feel heavier than they did before. Still you continue. There is no alternative. The day stretches ahead, and you're only partway through it. You return to the table where the next round of dough waits in quiet readiness. It has rested just enough to soften slightly its surface, smoother than before, its shape gently spread where it has settled. You place your hands on it again, and it feels familiar now. Not easy, but known. Across the room you hear a small clatter. One of the younger apprentices has dropped a wooden tool. The sound is brief, but it draws attention. The master baker turns his head. Not quickly, not dramatically, but enough. The apprentice freezes for a moment, then bends to retrieve the tool, his movements suddenly more careful than before. There is no shout, no raised voice, but the message is clear. Mistakes are noticed, even when they are small. You glance back at your own work. It must be steady, consistent. There is an established pattern in medieval workshops where hierarchy shapes every movement, even in silence. Apprentices learn not only through instruction, but through observation correction and the constant awareness that someone more experienced is always watching. You feel that awareness now. It sits just behind your actions, guiding them without words. You begin shaping the dough again. Each portion is divided, rounded, and set aside with a little more confidence than before. Your hands move with less hesitation. You no longer pause as often to consider each step. Instead, the sequence flows, one motion leading naturally into the next. The apprentice moves closer, carrying a small bucket of water. He sets it down beside you, his eyes flicking briefly toward your hands. You can tell he's watching, not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. This is how he learns, the same way you are learning now. Through repetition, through attention, through doing. You nod once, a small acknowledgement. He nods back. No words. None are needed. A well-recognized feature of medieval craft training is that apprenticeships could last for years, often beginning in early adolescence. During that time, young workers lived under the authority of a master, learning every aspect of the trade from basic tasks to more skilled work. You imagine how many mornings like this the master baker has seen, how many hands have stood where yours are now, how many mistakes corrected before they became habits. You press the dough again, fold, turn. Your arms feel heavier today than they did when you first began. The repetition has settled into your muscles, not as sharp pain, but as a deep, constant fatigue. Is not something you can ignore, but neither is it something that stops you. You adjust your stance again, shifting your weight slightly, finding a position that allows you to continue. The apprentice begins to mimic your movements, not perfectly, but close. His hands move with less confidence, the dough slipping slightly under his grip. He presses too hard at first, then too softly, trying to find the balance. Balance. You watch for a moment, then you reach out, guiding his hands just slightly, not correcting fully, just enough. He adjusts, improves. There is a quiet exchange here, one that mirrors what you have received even if no one formally announced it. Knowledge moves downward, passed from one set of hands to another. A curious note found in some historical accounts mentions that apprentices were sometimes judged not only on skill, but on endurance. The ability to continue working through long hours without complaint was seen as a sign of reliability, perhaps even more than technical ability. You understand that now. Skill can be taught. Endurance must be proven. The room grows warmer still. The fire has reached a steady strength and the heat no longer fluctuates. It surrounds you, pressing gently but constantly against your skin. Your clothes feel heavier, with it your movements slightly slower as your body adjusts. You wipe your forehead with the back of your hand. A brief motion, then you continue. The master baker steps closer again, his gaze moving between you and the apprentice. He watches the shaping, the handling, the spacing of the dough on the table. His attention lingers for a moment on one piece. Then he reaches out and adjusts it slightly. A small correction, but precise. You notice the difference immediately. The shape is tighter, more controlled. He says nothing, but the lesson is clear. Details matter, even small ones. You replicate the adjustment on the next piece, then the next, each one slightly better than the last. There is an ongoing discussion among scholars about how much variation existed between individual bakers within the same town. Some suggest that despite shared rules, each baker developed a distinct style noticeable to regular customers. Others argue that the need for consistency reduced individuality. As you shape the dough, you begin to see how both ideas might be true. There is room for difference, but only within limits. You line the pieces carefully, spacing them just enough to allow for expansion. The table begins to fill again, rows of shaped dough resting quietly, waiting for their turn. You step back for a moment, stretching your fingers slightly. They feel stiff now, less flexible than before. You flex them once, twice, then return to work. The apprentice looks toward the oven. You follow his gaze. It is time again. You move together this time, coordinating without speaking. He opens the oven door while you prepare the peel. The heat rushes out stronger than before, but now you are ready for it. You turn your face slightly, your body adjusting instinctively. You slide the loaves in, one after another. He watches closely, noting the spacings, the placement, the care taken to avoid contact between them. You close the oven. The moment passes. Now begins. There is a sense now that the work is no longer unfamiliar. It is still demanding, still exhausting, but it no longer feels uncertain. You know what comes next. You know how to respond. The rhythm has settled into you. Not completely, but enough. You return to the table once more, your hands already reaching for the next portion of dough. The day continues, and you continue with it. The heat settles into you in a way that feels almost permanent. At first, it was something you noticed in waves, a presence that rose and fell as you moved closer to or farther from the oven. Now it feels constant, as if it has found a place beneath your skin and decided to stay there. Your clothes cling slightly at the shoulders. The air feels thicker, with every breath carrying flour dust smoke, and something faintly sweet from the bread itself. You shift your weight again, not out of habit this time, but necessity. Your back tightens as you straighten, then bends again as your hands return to the table. The motion repeats so often that it begins to feel like a single continuous movement rather than separate actions. There is no clear beginning or end, only a steady cycle. A commonly accepted observation about pre-modern bakehouses is that they were among the hottest work environments in a town, especially during long baking days. Without ventilation as you would understand it today, heat gathered and stayed, turning the workspace into something closer to a slow enclosed fire. You feel that now more than ever. Your breathing adjusts, not faster, but deeper. You take in the warm air, hold it for a moment, then release it slowly. It is not comfortable, but it is manageable. You've already learned that discomfort is not a signal to stop. It is simply part of the work. The apprentice wipes his forehead with the back of his arm, leaving a faint streak of flour behind. He glances toward the doorway, where the outside light now appears brighter, almost inviting by comparison. For a moment you understand the thought. Cool air, open space. But it passes quickly. There is no leaving. Not yet. You press your hands into the dough again, though your grip feels slightly weaker now. The earlier strength has softened into something more measured. You rely less on force and more on control guiding the dough rather than pushing it. It responds better this way. A small realization, but an important one. There is an unusual detail mentioned in some regional accounts that bakers often develop distinctive marks on their bodies from years of work. Hardened palms, thickened skin along the fingers, and a slight stoop in posture were all considered signs of experience. You glance briefly at your own hands, still adjusting, still learning, and wonder how they will change over time. The master baker moves past you again, his steps slow but purposeful. He pauses near the oven, checking the fire with a quick practice motion. A piece of wood is shifted, another added, the balance maintained without hesitation. He does not linger. He never does. You return your attention to the table. The dough feels warmer now than before its surface, softer from the heat of the room. It stretches more easily under your hands, though it also sticks more readily if you're not careful. You dust it lightly with flour, just enough to keep it manageable. Each movement requires attention, more than before. A continuing line of scholarly discussion considers how much physical strain medieval labourers endured on a daily basis, particularly in trades like baking. Some interpretations suggest that such work built resilience over time, while others emphasize the long-term toll it took on joints, lungs, and overall health. You can feel both possibilities in your body, the growing strength and the quiet strain beneath it. You shape another set of loaves, your hands moving more slowly now, but with greater precision. The forms come together more evenly, the edges smoother, the surfaces more controlled. Improvement does not come suddenly, it settles in gradually, almost unnoticed, until you look back. The apprentice watches again, his eyes following your movements closely. This time his hands mirror yours more accurately. The dough responds better to him now, less slipping, less resistance. You nod slightly, a silent acknowledgement. He returns with the nod, a hint of satisfaction crossing his face before it fades back into focus. The oven calls again, not with sound, but with timing. You feel it. You move toward it, the heat intensifying as always. Your skin reacts less sharply now, though it is no less present. You take the peel, your grip was still firm despite the fatigue in your fingers. The door opens. Heat rushes outward, wrapping around you in a familiar wave. You reach in, slide beneath the loaves, lift, draw them out. Each one is slightly different in colour, in shape, in the way the crust is formed. Some are more evenly browned, others carry darker edges. You notice these differences now in a way you did not before. You set them down carefully. The sound is steady, solid. You tap one lightly again. The hollow tone returns, familiar now, a sign you have begun to trust even without fully understanding. You arrange the loaves on the table, spacing them so they cool without touching. Steam rises faintly from their surfaces, carrying the smell of fresh bread into the room. It is stronger now, richer, almost filling on its own. And yet you are still hungry. You realize it suddenly. A quiet awareness. You have been working for hours, and the thought of food has not crossed your mind until now. The smell does not tempt you in the way you might expect. It simply reminds you of what this work is for. Others will eat. You will continue. You wipe your hands again, though the flour never fully leaves them. It settles into the lines of your skin, into the fabric of your clothes, into the air itself. It is everywhere, a constant presence. You glance once more toward the doorway. The light is bright now. The day fully arrived, but inside the rhythm remains unchanged. You return to the table. Your hands lower once more. Press, fold, turn. The work continues, and so do you. The next batch of dough rests before you, softer now from the warmth of the room, its surface slightly risen as if it has taken a quiet breath while you are occupied elsewhere. You place your hands on it again, and this time the texture feels more responsive, less resistant, almost cooperative. You press gently, not forcing, guiding. The movement feels different from earlier, less struggle, more shaping. Your hands have learned something, even if you could not name it. The dough responds with a subtle give, stretching and folding in a way that feels almost predictable. You begin dividing it into portions, but this time there is a difference. The size of each piece matters more. You notice it in the way the master baker watches, his gaze lingering slightly longer than before. These loaves are not all meant for the same table. Some will go to those who can afford finer bread, others to those who cannot. Bread carries quiet distinctions. A broadly accepted truth about medieval diets is that the type of bread a person ate often reflected their social position. Wealthier households preferred lighter loaves made from finely sifted wheat, while poorer families relied on darker bread made from rye barley, or mixed grains that were less refined but more accessible. You see that difference now in the flour itself. Some of it is pale, soft, almost silky between your fingers. Other portions are coarser, heavier, with small particles that catch slightly against your skin. You separate them carefully. The finer flour is measured with more attention, and the portions shaped with greater precision. These loaves must look appealing, their surfaces smooth, their forms even. They are not only food, they are a display of quality. You take extra care, smoothing the edges, tightening the shape, a small detail but noticeable. The coarser dough is different. It resists more, its texture less forgiving. The shapes are rougher, less uniform, but no less important. These loaves will be eaten just the same, perhaps more quickly, perhaps with less ceremony, but with equal necessity. You shape them as best you can, not perfect, but sufficient. There is a lesser-known custom mentioned in some records where darker bread was sometimes humorously referred to as bread for those who worked hardest, as if its roughness matched the labour of those who consumed it. Whether this was said in jest or carried a deeper meaning is difficult to know. You can imagine both. You line the loaves separately, keeping the finer ones slightly apart from the others. Not out of preference, but out of expectation. They will be chosen differently, paid for differently, judged differently. The apprentice notices. He watches the distinction. His hands move more carefully now, as if aware that not all dough is treated the same. You glance at him briefly. He understands, without needing explanation. There is an ongoing scholarly conversation about how rigid social divisions were reflected in everyday food. Some historians suggest that these differences were deeply ingrained, while others point out that in times of shortage such distinctions could blur, with everyone relying on whatever grain was available. You wonder what happens then, when choice disappears. For now choice still exists, You carry the finer loaves toward the oven first. The heat greets you again, familiar but still intense. You open the door and the wave of warmth rolls outward, brushing against your face and arms. You place the loaves inside with careful spacing, ensuring they have room to expand without touching. Precision matters here, more than before. You close the oven and turn back. The coarser loaves wait. You bring them forward next, placing them in a separate area of the oven where the heat is slightly different. Not weaker, not stronger, but to their texture. You are beginning to understand these small adjustments. They are not written, they are felt. You step back, letting the oven work. The apprentice moves beside you, his eyes fixed on the door as if trying to see through it. You recognize that feeling, the desire to understand what happens inside, to see the transformation as it occurs. But it remains hidden, always. You return to the table, wiping your hands briefly against your apron. The fabric is now marked with layers of flour, smudges of dough, and faint traces of ash. It tells the story of your morning without a single word. You take a breath, longer this time. The air feels heavy but familiar. The sounds of the street drift in through the doorway. Voices, footsteps, the distant movement of carts. The town continues, each person moving through their own routine, connected by the simple fact that they will all eat. Bread ties them together, even if they never think about it. A small detail noted in some accounts is that finer bread was sometimes reserved for special occasions, even among those who could afford it regularly. It was not always an everyday item, but something to be appreciated when circumstances allowed. You imagine one of your loaves placed on a table, surrounded by voices shared among people who see it as more than just sustenance. Then you imagine another eaten quickly by someone standing in a narrow street, their focus on the next task, rather than the meal itself. Both are part of this. Both come from your hands. You glance again toward the oven. It is time. You step forward, your movement steady, despite the fatigue that now sits deeper in your arms. You open the door and the heat meets you once more, no longer surprising but still powerful. You reach in, lift, draw the loaves out. The finer ones have taken on a light even colour, their surfaces smooth, their shapes holding well. The coarser loaves are darker, their crusts rougher, their forms less uniform. You set them down, side by side. The difference is clear, but so is their purpose. You arrange them carefully, knowing that soon they will be chosen, carried away, and disappear into the lives of others. You step back for a moment, just a moment. Your hands rest lightly against the table. Your breath steady, your body aware of every movement it has made so far. There is still much to do, but you have come further than you realized. You straighten slightly, then lower your hands once more. The next batch waits, and the day continues. The table fills again with new dough, and with it comes a quiet awareness that what you are shaping here depends on more than your hands alone. The flour you use, the water you mix, even the texture beneath your fingers all begin far beyond this room. You press into the dough, but your thoughts drift briefly outward. To the fields, to the roads, to the mill. A broadly recognized reality of medieval life is that bakers stood at the end of a long chain. Grain had to be grown, harvested, transported, and ground before it ever reached your table. At any point along that path, something could go wrong. You feel that truth in the flour itself. Some days it is fine, soft, easy to work. Other days it's coarse, uneven, reluctant. Today it falls somewhere in between. You need steadily adjusting your pressure to match its character. The dough resists slightly more than before, requiring a firmer touch. You respond without thinking, your hands adapting as they have begun to learn. Behind you, the oven continues its steady presence. In front of you, the dough slowly transforms. The apprentice approaches with another sack. He sets it down with a soft thud, then loosens the top, revealing the pale surface within. You glance at it, then at him. He watches your reaction. You reach in, letting the flour run through your fingers. It feels slightly heavier. Damp, perhaps. You nod once. Acceptable, but not ideal. There is a small but persistent detail mentioned in certain regional records that flour quality could vary not only by harvest but by how it was stored and transported. Moisture, pests and time could all alter its condition before it ever reached the baker. You can feel that variability now. It is not dramatic, but it is there. You adjust the amount of water as you mix the next batch, adding slightly less at first, then more as needed. The balance is delicate. Too much and the dough becomes difficult to handle. Too little and it remains stiff, unwilling to stretch. You find the middle, not by rule, but by touch. The master baker watches briefly, his eyes moving from the flour to your hands. He gives a small nod, almost imperceptible, then turns away. Approval. Approval again. Quiet. You continue working. The dough comes together, though it feels different from earlier batches, slightly denser, less elastic. You need longer, allowing the movement to soften it, to bring it closer to what you need. Time becomes part of the process. More kneading, more patience. A continuing discussion among historians explores how dependent urban populations were on stable grain supplies. Some suggest that even small disruptions could lead to shortages, rising prices, and tension within the community. Others note that local systems often adapted drawing from nearby sources when possible. You imagine that uncertainty now: a delayed cart, a failed harvest, a road made impassable by rain. Each one would reach you eventually, in the weight of the flour, in the feel of the dough. You divide the batch into portions, your movement steady despite the slight change in texture. These shapes come together, though not as smoothly as before. You compensate, adjusting your technique, tightening the forms where needed. It is not perfect, but it will hold. The apprentice mirrors your actions again, though his hand struggles slightly more with this batch. The dough sticks to his fingers, pulling unevenly as he tries to shape it. You reach over, dusting it lightly with flour. A small correction. He nods, then continues. Learning again. Always learning. You carry the shaped loaves toward the oven. The heat meets you as it always does, steady and unavoidable. You open the door and the warmth spills outward, wrapping around your arms and face. You place the loaves inside, carefully, spacing them just enough. You close the door. The process repeats, but never exactly the same. You step back, your hands resting briefly at your sides. For a moment you feel the weight of the morning more clearly than before. The constant motion, the heat, the repetition. It settles into your body in a way that is no longer new. It is becoming familiar, a subtle but important shift. There is a lesser-known observation in some accounts that bakers often developed an ability to predict how dough would behave before it even entered the oven, simply by how it felt during preparation. It was not certainty, but a kind of informed expectation. You begin to sense that. This batch will be heavier, the loaves denser. Still good, but different. You return to the table, preparing the next round. The flour from the new sack weights, its texture slightly uneven, its colour just a shade darker than before. You accept it. There is no alternative. You mix again, your hands moving with practiced familiarity. The motions repeat, but your awareness of them has changed. You notice more now, small differences, subtle shifts. Each one matters. Matters. The sounds of the street drift in more clearly now. Voices louder. Movement more constant. The town is fully alive. And still you remain here. At the table. At the oven. At the centre of a process that begins far beyond you and ends far beyond you as well. You press your hands into the dough once more. It yields. Slowly. Reluctantly. But it yields. You continue. Because you must. Because this is what the day requires. And the day is far from over. You step away from the table for a brief moment, carrying a small basket toward the doorway. The air outside reaches you before you cross the threshold, cooler, lighter, carrying scents that feel almost sharp after the thickness of the bakehouse. You pause just inside the entrance. The street stretches before you alive now in a way it was not earlier. Movement flows steadily in both directions. People pass close to one another, their paths weaving together, without collision, guided by habit more than thought. You step out just a few paces, enough to feel the difference. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, a mix of packed earth and scattered stones. It holds the memory of rain, of hooves, of countless steps that have pressed it into its current shape. You adjust your footing instinctively, your balance adapting to the subtle shifts. The air carries layers of scent, not unpleasant, but complex. Animals stand tethered nearby, their presence steady and unmoving. A cart rolls past its wheels, creaking under weight. Somewhere close, something cooks, releasing a faint aroma that blends with the sharper notes of the street. A commonly observed feature of medieval towns is that cleanliness, as you might define it today, was not a priority in the same way. Streets were shared by people, animals, and waste, all moving and settling together in a dense lived-in environment. You take this in without reaction. It is simply part of the world you stand in. A woman passes close to you, carrying a basket similar to yours, though filled with vegetables rather than bread. She moves quickly, her attention fixed ahead. Behind her, a man calls out, advertising something you cannot quite make out over the surrounding noise. Voices overlap. Sounds blend. The town speaks in layers. You shift your grip on the basket, feeling its weight against your arm. Inside, a few loaves remain meant for those who did not come earlier, or perhaps for delivery to someone who expects them without needing to ask. You move forward, carefully. Your path is not straight. You adjust with each step, avoiding others, stepping around obstacles, navigating the narrow space with growing ease. It feels different from the stillness of the bakehouse, less controlled, more unpredictable, and yet there is a rhythm here too. You begin to recognize it. A curious detail recorded in some accounts suggests that bakers were often among the most familiar figures in a neighborhood, not only because of their work, but because of their regular presence in the streets. They saw people at the beginning of the day in moments that were both routine and essential. You can feel that familiarity forming now, even if you do not yet belong fully. You reach a nearby doorway. Pause. Knock lightly. There is a moment before it opens. Then a figure appears, her expression neutral but expectant. You hold out the bread. She takes it without inspection, placing coins into your hand with practiced ease. No words, just exchange. You nod slightly, then turn back. The street continues around you. A group of children moves past, their steps quicker, their voices lighter than the adults around them. They weave through the crowd with an ease that suggests long familiarity with this space. You step aside, letting them pass. There is a line of thought among historians that urban life in the medieval period was far more interconnected than it might appear at first glance. Trades, households, and daily routines overlapped, constantly creating a network of small repeated interactions that held the community together. You begin to see that network now, in passing glances, in brief exchanges, in the simple act of delivering bread. You turn back towards the bakehouse. The doorway appears smaller from this angle, its dark interior contrasting with the brightness outside. For a moment you hesitate, standing between the two spaces. Inside is heat, repetition, and structure. Outside is movement, variation, and noise. Both are part of your day. You step back inside. The warmth wraps around you immediately, familiar and heavy. The sounds of the street fade slightly, replaced by the steady presence of the oven and the quiet movements within the room. The apprentice looks up as you enter. You place the remaining bread on the table. He nods, then returns to his task. You move back to your place, your hands already reaching for the dough once more. The brief time outside lingers in your senses, but it does not slow you. If anything, it sharpens your awareness of the work before you. There is still much to do. The master baker stands near the oven, his posture unchanged, his attention fixed on the process that never truly stops. He glances at you briefly, then back to the fire, a silent acknowledgement. You return it by continuing your work. There is an understated observation in some writings that bakers, despite spending much of their time indoors, were closely tied to the life of the street through their role in feeding it. They existed at a point where inside and outside met, where production and daily life intersected. You feel that now more clearly than before. You are not separate from the town. You are part of it. Even if your place is here, at the table, at the oven, you press your hands into the dough again. It responds as expected. The rhythm resumes. The street continues beyond the doorway, and you remain within the steady, unbroken flow of your work. You settle back into the steady rhythm of the bakehouse, the brief glimpse of the street already fading into the background of your awareness. The air inside feels thicker again, heavier, as if it closes gently around you the moment you return. Your hands find the dough without hesitation. Press, fold, turn. The sequence repeats, though your attention begins to shift elsewhere, drawn not by sound or movement, but by something more distant. The bells. They begin faintly carried through the walls, soft at first, then clearer as they continue. a steady ringing that moves through the town, touching each street, each doorway, each person. You pause for just a moment, not long, just enough to notice. A widely acknowledged feature of medieval life is that church bells structured the day as much as the rising and setting of the sun. They marked time, called people to prayer, and reminded everyone of the presence of the church in daily routines. You hear that structure now, even here. Inside the heat and labour of the bakehouse, the apprentice glances upward as if he could see the source of the sound through the ceiling. His hands slow slightly, then resume their motion. The rhythm of the bells does not stop the work. It never does, but it shapes it. You continue kneading your movements, aligning unconsciously with the steady cadence. There is something calming in it, something that cuts through the constant repetition of physical effort. A reminder that the day has a pattern beyond your own. You divide the dough again, shaping each portion with practiced care. The forms come together more evenly. Now your hands adjusting, automatically correcting small imperfection before they become visible. The bells continue, then fade, leaving behind a quiet that feels briefly deeper than before. There is an unusual custom mentioned in some local traditions, where certain bakers would briefly pause their work during the specific religious observances, offering a silent moment before continuing. Whether this was widely practiced or only observed in certain areas remains uncertain, but it reflects how closely daily labour and belief were intertwined. You do not pause, not fully, but you feel the presence of that idea, a quiet acknowledgement. Then your hands move again. The master baker crosses the room, his steps measured, his attention shifting between the oven and the table. He adjusts a piece of wood within the fire, then turns slightly, listening for a moment as if measuring something you cannot hear. Perhaps the same bells, perhaps something else. 2. You continue shaping the dough, your fingers moving with greater confidence now. The texture feels familiar, the resistance expected. You know how to respond to it without needing to think. This is becoming instinct. There is an ongoing line of academic thought that questions how deeply religious observance influenced daily labour in trades like baking. Some interpretations suggest that faith was woven into every action, while others argue that practical necessity often took precedence, especially in time-sensitive work. You understand that tension now. The bells call, the work continues. Both exist at once. You carry another batch toward the oven. The heat greets you as always, steady and unavoidable. You open the door and the warmth flows outward, wrapping around your arms, your face, your chest. It no longer surprises you, but it still demands respect. You place the loaves inside, carefully spaced, precisely lined. You close the door. The process continues. You step back, your breathing steady, your body adjusting to the constant cycle of movement and heat. The fatigue in your arms has deepened, but it has also settled into something you can carry without resistance. It is no longer sharp. It is constant. You return to the table. More dough waits. Always more. You press your hands into it again, feeling the familiar give beneath your palms. The motion feels smoother now, less effort, wasted, more directed movement. You are learning how to conserve energy even as you continue working. A subtle but important shift. The apprentice works beside you, his movements more confident than before. He shapes the dough with fewer errors, his hands responding more naturally to its texture. You notice he is learning too. The room feels quieter now, though the work has not slowed. The earlier rush has passed, replaced by a steady continuation. The sounds are softer, the movements more measured. A different part of the day. You glance briefly toward the doorway. The light has changed again, brighter now, stronger. The morning has fully settled into day. Time moves, whether you mark it or not. A lesser-known observation from some sources suggests that bakers often measure their day not by hours but by batches, each round of dough, each cycle of the oven forming a natural sense of progression. You begin to feel that now, not in minutes, but in movement, in repetition. In the quiet completion of one task before the next begins, you carry another set of loaves to the oven. Open. Place. Close. Step back. The rhythm continues. You return to the table once more, your hands lowering into the dough without hesitation. The motion feels almost automatic now, guided by memory more than thought. You're no longer simply following. You are participating fully. The bells are gone. The street continues. The oven burns, and you remain here, within it all. The day moves forward without announcing it. There is no clear moment when morning becomes something else. No signal that tells you one part has ended and another has begun. Instead, the work simply continues and you move with it, your body carrying you from one task to the next. The table feels familiar beneath your hands now. The dough responds as expected. Press, fold, turn. Each motion feels less like effort and more like continuation. But there is a subtle change in the air, not in temperature, not in sound, in attention. The master baker still sits his position closer to the front of the bakehouse, his posture slightly more alert than before. His eyes move toward the doorway, more often lingering just a fraction longer each time. You notice, even if you do not yet know why, a figure appears at the entrance, not like the others. His clothing is plain but orderly, his movements measured, his gaze steady. He does not look at the bread first. He looks at the room, at the oven, at you, then at the master baker. There is a quiet understanding here, an inspection. A well-established part of urban life in many medieval towns was the presence of officials tasked with checking the quality and fairness of essential goods, including bread. These inspections were not always predictable, and their outcomes could affect both reputation and livelihood. You feel the shift immediately. The apprentice straightens slightly. Your own movements become more precise, more deliberate. Not slower, but sharper. The figure steps further inside. He approaches the table. His eyes move over the loaves, noting their size, their shape, their colour. He does not touch them yet. He simply observes. The master baker steps forward, his expression unchanged, his posture calm. There is no greeting, but there is recognition. The two stand for a moment, then the inspection begins. The official reaches for a loaf, lifts it, weighs it in his hand. He turns it slightly, examining the crust, the markings, the form. His fingers press gently, testing the firmness. His face reveals nothing. You watch, without staring. Your hands continue moving through the dough, though your attention is divided. Each motion you make feels more important, now more visible, even if no one is directly watching you. There is a curious detail found in some records that officials would sometimes compare loaves from different bakers to ensure consistency across the town. Bread was not only a product, it was a measure of fairness. You can feel that expectation in the room. The official sets the loaf down, then reaches for another. This one slightly smaller. He weighs it again, pauses. His brow shifts, just slightly. You feel it. A change in the air. The master baker steps closer, his presence steady, his gaze focused on the loaf in the official's hand. There is no panic, no sudden movement, only attention. The official speaks quietly. You cannot hear the words, but you understand the meaning. A question, a concern. The master baker responds, equally quiet, equally controlled. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion about how strict enforcement of bread regulations truly was. Some interpretations suggest that penalties could be severe, including fines or public humiliation. Others argue that enforcement varied widely depending on location and circumstance. You see that uncertainty here, in the tension, in the pause. The official sets the loaf down. He looks again, then nods, a small motion, but enough. The tension eases, not completely, but noticeably. You exhale slowly, though you had not realized you were holding your breath. The inspection continues for a few moments longer, the official moving through the remaining loaves with the same careful attention. Each one is lifted, examined, and returned. No further concern. At last he steps back, gives a brief nod to the master baker, then turns and leaves. The doorway returns to its usual rhythm. The street continues. The sound of footsteps fades. You feel the shift again. The room relaxes. Not fully, but enough. The apprentice lets out a quiet breath, his shoulders lowering slightly. He glances at you, then back to his work, his hands moving with renewed focus. The master baker returns to the oven, adjusting the fire, as if nothing unusual has occurred. But you can see it in the precision of his movements. He noticed everything, every detail, every loaf. You return your full attention to the dough. Your hands move more carefully now, your awareness sharpened by what you have just seen. Each portion is shaped with greater attention, each edge smoothed more deliberately, not out of fear, But out of understanding, a lesser-known note from certain accounts suggests that bakers who consistently met standards could build a reputation that protected them during inspections, while those with poor records face greater scrutiny. You begin to see how that reputation is built, not in single, but in every loaf. You carry the next batch to the oven. Open, place, close. The heat greets you again unchanged, constant, indifferent to what has just occurred. The work continues, as it always does. You step back, your breathing steady, your movements returning to their earlier rhythm. The tension fades, gradually replaced by the familiar flow of tasks. But something has shifted inside you. You understand now that this work is not only physical, it is watched, measured, judged, and you are part of that. You return to the table, your hands lower into the dough once more. Press, fold, turn. The rhythm resumes, but with a new layer of awareness beneath it. The room settles again after the inspection, so the memory of it lingers quietly beneath everything you do. Your hands return to the dough, but there is a new sharpness in your awareness, a sense that each motion carries weight beyond the immediate task. You press forward, fold, turn. The rhythm continues, but it feels slightly different now. Not disrupted, just more defined, as if the edges of your work have become clearer. Across the room, you notice movement that you had not paid much attention to before. A woman steps in from the back area, carrying a small bundle of cloth. Her presence is steady, familiar to the space in a way that suggests she belongs here as much as anyone. She moves past the apprentice, setting the bundle down near the table, then begins sorting through a collection of smaller tools. You realize she has been here all along, just not at the center of your attention. A frequently acknowledged aspect of medieval trades is that much of the labor within workshops was shared among family members, especially women, even when official records listed only male masters. Their work often remained less visible, though no less essential. You watch her for a moment. Her movements are efficient, practiced, unhurried. She checks the cloth coverings used for resting dough, adjusts their placement, and replaces one that has become too damp. Each action is small but necessary. She glances briefly at your work, not critically, but attentively, then continues. You return your focus to the dough, though you are now more aware of the space around you. The bakehouse is not just you, the apprentice, and the master. It is a network of quiet contributions, each one supporting the others. You divide the dough again, shaping each portion with steady hands. The forms come together more smoothly, now your earlier uncertainty replaced by something closer to confidence. Not complete, but growing. The woman moves closer, placing a fresh cloth over a set of shaped loaves. Her hands are quick, precise, ensuring that the dough is protected as it rests. She adjusts the edges carefully, then steps back. You notice how the cloth changes the look of the loaves, softening their outlines, holding their shape. There is a small but intriguing note found in certain household accounts that some bakers' families took pride in the care of these details, considering the preparation and handling of dough as important as the baking itself. It was not only about the oven, it was about everything leading up to it. You begin to understand that more clearly now. The process is larger than any single step. The apprentice reaches for a cloth, attempting to replicate what he has seen. His movements are less controlled, the fabric slipping slightly as he tries to position it. The woman pauses, watches, then adjusts his hands with a brief gentle motion. He corrects, improves. No words are exchanged. But the lesson is clear. You return to shaping the next set of loaves, your hands moving with greater ease. The dough responds well today, its texture balanced, its resistance manageable. You find yourself working with less effort, more flow. The fatigue remains, but it no longer interrupts you. It moves with you. There is a continuing academic discussion regarding the visibility of women's labour in medieval trades, particularly in urban settings. Some scholars argue that their contributions were integral yet under-recorded, while others suggest that their roles varied widely depending on region and circumstance. You see that variation here, not in theory, but in motion. The woman steps back again, her task complete for the moment. She moves toward the rear of the bakehouse, disappearing briefly from view only to return with another small bundle. The work never truly stops. It shifts, it flows, You carry another batch of shaped dough toward the oven, your step steady, your grip firm despite the hours that have already passed. The heat greets you again, familiar, constant, almost expected now. You open the door, place the loaves, close it. The sequence feels natural, unbroken. You step back, your hands resting briefly at your sides. The room feels full, not crowded, but complete. Each person moves within their role, each task connecting to the next without interruption. A subtle observation noted in some sources is that successful workshops often depended on this quiet coordination where each individual understood their place within the larger process. It was not always spoken, but it was understood. You feel that understanding now, even if you are still finding your place within it. The apprentice works beside you again. His movements more confident than before. He shapes the dough with fewer corrections, his hands responding more naturally to its texture. You nod slightly. Recognition. He notices. His posture shifts just a little. Encouraged. The woman passes behind you once more, her steps light, her attention focused on the next task. You catch a glimpse of her adjusting a container near the back, ensuring that everything remains in order. Small details. Constant care. You return to the table, your hands lowering into the dough again. The motion feels almost automatic now, guided by memory, by repetition, by the quiet lessons you have absorbed throughout the day. Press, fold, turn. The rhythm continues, but now it feels shared. Not just your work, but part of something larger. The bakehouse hums with quiet activity, each movement contributing to the whole. The oven burns steadily, the dough transforms, and the bread continues to take shape. You are no longer simply learning. You are participating fully. And the day continues. The flow of the day shifts again almost gently as the steady rhythm of the bakehouse meets something larger outside. You notice it first in the sound. More voices, not louder in a single burst, but layered, overlapping, spreading through the street like a tide that has slowly risen. You glance toward the doorway. More people pass now than before. Some move with purpose, others linger, pausing to speak, to look, to compare what they carry. There is a different energy in the air, something that feels less routine and more concentrated. Market day, or something close to it. You do not need to be told, you can feel it. A commonly observed feature of medieval towns is that market days drew people from surrounding areas, bringing together goods, news and movement in a way that made the town feel larger, more connected than usual. You see that now in the variety of faces passing by. Some familiar, others not. Others not. Clothing slightly different, accents shifting in ways you cannot quite place. You carry a small stack of loaves toward the front, again placing them where they can be seen easily. The arrangement matters more today. There are more eyes, more choices, more comparisons being made even if silently. A man steps in his clothing dusted with travel, his boots marked by distance. He looks at the bread with interest, not the quick practice glance of someone who comes every day, but with curiosity. He asks a question. You catch only part of it. Different words, different rhythm. You respond simply holding up a loaf, letting it speak for itself. He nods, though slower than the others have, then selects one, examining it with care. His fingers trace the surface, noting the texture, the firmness, the shape. He pays, leaves, but not quickly. He looks back once before stepping fully into the street again. You return to the table. The pace increases slightly. Not as intense as the early morning rush, but steadier, more varied. People arrive in small clusters, sometimes speaking to each other, sometimes silent but always attentive. There is a small detail mentioned in some accounts that travelling customers often judged bread more critically than locals, comparing it to what they knew from elsewhere. Whether this led to higher standards or simply more scrutiny remains uncertain. You feel that scrutiny now, in the way certain eyes linger. In the way loaves are turned more carefully in unfamiliar hands. You adjust your movements, not consciously, but naturally. Each loaf you present is placed with a little more care, your attention sharpening as you move between the table and the doorway. The apprentice works beside you, his pace quickening slightly to match the flow. He moves with more confidence now, his hands less hesitant, his actions more direct. He keeps up. That matters. The woman continues her work in the background, ensuring that cloths are replaced, surfaces cleared, and tools return to their place. Her movements remain steady, unaffected by the increased activity. The bakehouse holds its balance, even as the outside world shifts. There is a continuing scholarly discussion about how market days influence local economies, particularly in smaller towns. Some interpretations suggest they provided essential opportunities for trade and exchange, while others note that they also introduced competition and pressure on local craftsmen. You feel both sides of that now. More customers, more expectation, more comparison. You carry another batch to the oven. The heat greets you as it always does, unchanged by the movement outside. You open the door, place the loaves, and close it again, the sequence flowing as it has all day. Inside remains constant. Outside continues to shift. You step back, wiping your hands briefly against your apron. The fabric is marked more heavily now, layers of flour and ash forming patterns that speak of hours of work. You glance again toward the doorway. A group stands just beyond it, speaking animatedly, their gestures more expressive than most you have seen today. One of them points toward the bakehouse, then toward the bread, as if making a comparison. You cannot hear the words, but you understand the meaning. Your work is being discussed, evaluated. Not unkindly, but carefully. You return your focus to the table, your hands lowering into the dough once more. The rhythm steadies you, grounding you in the familiar motions that do not change no matter how the world outside shifts. Press, fold, turn. A lesser-known observation from some records suggests that bakers who adapted well to these busier days often built stronger reputations as more people carried their bread beyond the immediate neighborhood. You begin to see how that happens. One loaf at a time, one exchange at a time. You shape the next batch, your hands moving with practiced ease, despite the growing fatigue in your arms. The dough responds well, its texture balanced, its form holding as you guide it into shape. You line the pieces carefully, spacing them evenly, preparing them for the oven. The apprentice mirrors your actions, his movements now more aligned with yours than at any point earlier or in the day. He watches less, does more. You nod slightly. Approval. He notices, adjusts, continues. The sounds of the street begin to shift again, not quieter but different. The initial energy of arrival gives way to a more settled movement as people find their places complete, their exchanges, and move on. The peak passes. Gradually, you carry the next batch to the oven. Open, place, close. The rhythm continues, unbroken. You return to the table once more, your hands lowering into the dough, your body moving with the flow that now feels natural. The market continues outside. The bakehouse continues within, and you stand between the two, working, shaping, providing. As the day moves steadily forward, the noise outside softens little by little, not disappearing but spreading out as if the town has taken a full breath and now exhales more slowly. The clusters of voices thin. The passing footsteps become less constant. The brief surge of activity settles into something calmer. Inside the bakehouse continues without interruption. You stand at the table, again your hands moving through another batch of dough. The texture feels familiar now, predictable in a way that would have seemed impossible only hours ago. You press fold and turn without hesitation, your body following a rhythm it has come to trust. Yet there is a slight shift in what you prepare. The shapes are different, not entirely but noticeably. Some loaves are larger, more carefully formed. Others are shaped with small variations, their surfaces smoothed with extra attention. You glance toward the master baker and you understand. These are not ordinary loaves, not entirely system. A widely accepted element of medieval life is that bread played a role not only in daily meals, but also in special occasions, such as feasts, weddings, and religious celebrations. On such occasions, bread could take on forms that carried symbolic meaning or simply reflected greater care in preparation. You feel that difference now in your hands. You shape one loaf more deliberately, smoothing its surface with slow, careful motions. The edges are drawn inward more tightly, the form more controlled. It holds its shape with a quiet firmness that feels distinct from the loaves you have made earlier. You pause for a moment, just a moment, to observe, then continue. The apprentice watches closely, his eyes following each movement. He attempts to replicate the same care, Though his hands still lack the same control, the dough responds unevenly, its surface less smooth, its shape less defined. You reach over, guiding slightly. A small correction. He adjusts, improves. There is a faint sense of pride in that exchange. Quiet, unspoken. A curious note appears in some regional traditions that certain breads prepared for celebrations were shaped with patterns or slight decorative touches, even if simple. These were not elaborate designs, but small variations that set them apart from everyday loaves. You take a small blade and score a more deliberate pattern into one loaf. The cut is shallow, controlled, forming a simple shape that will open slightly as it bakes. It feels different, more intentional. You place it among the others. They rest together waiting. The woman steps closer, her attention drawn to these loaves. She adjusts the cloth covering them, ensuring they remain protected, her movements just as precise as before. She glances at the scored pattern, then at you. A brief look, acknowledgement. Then she returns to her work. There is an ongoing line of inquiry among historians about how much variety existed in everyday food compared to special occasions. Some argue that most diets were highly repetitive, while others suggest that even small changes in preparation could create meaningful differences. You sense that now. This is still bread, still flour. Still water, and yet it feels distinct. You carry the shaped loaves toward the oven. The heat greets you again, steady and familiar. You open the door, the warmth flowing outward, wrapping around your arms and face. You place the loaves carefully, giving them space, ensuring they do not touch. The scored one sits among them. You close the door, you step back, and you wait, not idly, but attentively. The transformation begins again, hidden behind the oven door. You listen not for a specific sound, but for the subtle changes that signal progress. The faint crackle, the quiet shift of heat. You feel it, even without seeing it. You return to the table, preparing the next batch. The dough feels slightly different again, though only in small ways. You adjust without thinking, your hands responding instinctively. The rhythm continues, but your awareness of it has deepened. The apprentice works beside you, his movements more confident than before. He shapes the dough with fewer corrections, his hands moving with a growing sense of control. You nod slightly. Recognition. He notices. His posture shifts. More certain. The woman moves through the space again, her tasks constant, her presence steady. She ensures that nothing is left unattended, that each part of the process remains supported. The bakehouse remains balanced, each role connected, each movement contributing. There is a lesser-known observation from some accounts that bakers who prepared bread for special occasions often gained additional recognition within their communities as these moments carried more visibility and meaning. You begin to understand that this work is not only about necessity, it is also about moments. You turn back toward the oven. It is time. You open the door. The heat meets you once more. You reach in, lift, draw the loaves out. They have changed. The surfaces are more golden, the shapes holding firmly the scored pattern, opening slightly, revealing the expansion beneath. It is subtle but noticeable. You set them down, side by side. They look different. Not entirely, but enough. You arrange them carefully, aware that they will be chosen with a different kind of attention. These loaves will be part of something beyond routine. You step back for a moment, your hands resting lightly against the table, your breath steady. The fatigue in your body is still there, deeper now, but it no longer surprises you. It has become part of the day, just as the heat, the motion, and the rhythm have. You straighten slightly, then return to the dough. The next batch waits, and the work continues. The light outside shifts again, though you notice it only in passing. It has moved from the sharp clarity of midday towards something softer, more angled, slipping through the doorway in a way that stretches shadows across the floor. Inside, the heat remains unchanged. The oven does not care about the sun. You return to the table, your hands lowering into another batch of dough. The texture feels slightly different today, though not enough to disrupt your rhythm. It yields beneath your palms, though, with a faint heaviness that was not there earlier. You press forward, fold, turn. The movement continues steady and unbroken, but something else sits beneath it now. a quiet awareness of time. A broadly recognized pattern in pre-modern food production is that the seasons shaped everything even when they were not immediately visible. Grain quality storage conditions and even the moisture in the air could influence how dough behaved from one day to the next. You feel that influence now, subtle but present. The flour you use today carries a slight dampness, a softness that changes how it binds with water. You adjust instinctively, adding a little less at first, then more as needed, watching how the mixture responds. It is no longer guesswork, it is familiarity. The apprentice works beside you, his movements slower now, his earlier energy softened by the long hours. His hands still follow the pattern, but there is a slight delay between each motion, a small hesitation that was not there before. Fatigue has reached him, as it has reached you. You glance at him briefly. He continues. So do you. There is a small but interesting note found in some records that during warmer months dough could rise more quickly, sometimes forcing bakers to adjust their timing to avoid overproofing. In colder seasons, the opposite was true, requiring longer waiting and more patience. You can imagine both. Today sits somewhere in between. You shape the dough into loaves, your hands moving with practiced care despite the growing heaviness in your arms. The forms come together smoothly, though you notice that your movements are slightly slower now. Not weaker, just measured. You line the loaves along the table, spacing them evenly, covering them lightly with cloth. The woman adjusts one of the coverings, ensuring it rests properly, her hands moving with the same quiet precision as before. She does not rush, neither do you. The pace of the day has settled. A reflective line of academic thought considers how seasonal change affected not only food supply but also the rhythm of labour itself. Some interpretations suggest that workers adapted their pace naturally, while others argue that the demands of daily production often overrode any adjustment. You feel that tension now. Your body slows. The work continues. You carry another batch toward the oven. The heat greets you again, familiar and constant. You open the door, placing the loaves inside with careful spacing. The warmth wraps around you, pressing gently against your skin. You close the door. Step back. Wait. The process repeats, but your awareness of it has deepened. You notice the way the dough expands slightly before it sets. The way the surface begins to change colour, even if only faintly at first. These details were always there, you're only now beginning to see them. A lesser-known detail from certain regions suggests that bakers sometimes adjusted their recipes slightly depending on the season, incorporating different grains or altering proportions based on availability. You think of the flour again, its texture, its weight, the way it responded differently this morning. Everything connects. You return to the table, preparing the next batch. Your hands move automatically, though the fatigue in your shoulders now feels heavier, more settled. It's not sharp, not overwhelming, but constant. You adjust your stance, shift your weight. Continue. The apprentice mirrors you, though his movements are less steady now. He presses the dough unevenly, then corrects himself, finding the rhythm again after a brief misstep. You reach over, guiding his hands once more. A small adjustment. He nods, grateful. Then continues. The room feels quieter now, though the work has not slowed. The earlier sounds of the street have softened, replaced by a more distant hum. The peak of activity has passed. What remains is steady, consistent. You glance toward the doorway. The light has changed again, warmer now, lower. The day is moving toward its later hours. You return your focus to the dough. Press, fold, turn. The rhythm continues. A quiet observation from some sources notes that experienced bakers often developed a sense of the day's progression without needing to look outside, judging time by the number of batches completed and the feel of the work itself. You begin to feel that now, not in hours, but in cycles, in repetition, in the subtle changes in your own body. You carry another batch to the oven. Open, place, close. The sequence remains the same, unchanged, reliable. You step back, your hands resting briefly at your sides. The heat surrounds you, the air thick but familiar. The fatigue settles deeper, but it no longer interrupts your movement. It moves with you. You return to the table once more, your hands lowering into the dough, your body continuing its steady work as the day shifts quietly around you. The seasons may change, the light may fade, but here in this moment the rhythm remains, and you remain within it. The light at the doorway grows softer, leaning toward gold rather than white. It stretches across the floor in a long, quiet line, touching the legs of the table, the edge of the oven, the marks left by countless steps before yours. You notice it only briefly. Then your hands return to the dough. Press, fold, turn. The rhythm continues, though it carries a different feeling now. Not urgency, not even steady demand, but something slower, more reflective. The busiest part of the day has passed, yet the work remains. It always remains. The apprentice works beside you quieter than before. His movements are careful, almost thoughtful, as if the repetition has drawn him inward. He watches his hands more closely now, correcting small mistakes before they grow. You do the same, without thinking. There is a subtle shift in attention across the room. The master baker stands near the oven, but his gaze moves more slowly now, less fixed on immediate action, and more on the overall flow. The woman continues her tasks, though with fewer interruptions, her movements settling into a calm routine. The bakehouse feels fuller in a different way. Less noise. More presence. A commonly noted aspect of medieval life is the persistence of belief in signs, omens, and small patterns that carried meaning beyond their surface. These beliefs often lived alongside practical knowledge, shaping how people interpreted the ordinary moments of their day. You begin to notice small things. A loaf that rises slightly unevenly. A crack that forms earlier than expected. The way one batch feels different from the last. They are not alarming, just noticeable. There is a quiet curiosity in them. You shape another loaf, smoothing its surface, pressing the edges inward with care. Your hands move slowly, almost gently, as if the pace of the day has finally reached them. The dough responds. Soft, warm. You pause for a brief moment, your fingers resting lightly against its surface. There is a stillness here that feels different from earlier. Not empty, but settled. Then you continue. There is a curious tradition mentioned in some regions where bakers would make small gestures for good fortune, such as tracing a simple sign over the dough or murmuring a quiet phrase before placing it in the oven. Whether these acts were widely practiced or varied from place to place is not entirely clear. You glance at the apprentice. He shapes his dough without pause, unaware of such customs, or perhaps simply focused on the task at hand. You return your attention to your own work. Your hands continue. The motion is steady, familiar. A continuing line of historical discussion considers how deeply such beliefs influence daily labour. Some interpretations suggest they were central to how people understood uncertainty, while others propose that practical experience often outweighed superstition in skilled trades. You feel that balance now. The dough behaves according to what you do, and yet there is always a small space where outcome feels uncertain. You carry another batch toward the oven. The heat meets you again, though it feels less intense now, or perhaps you have simply grown accustomed to it. You open the door, placing the loaves inside with practiced care. One loaf catches your attention. Its surface is slightly uneven, its shape not as smooth as the others. You hesitate, just for a moment, then place it inside anyway. You close the door, step back. Wait, the process continues. But your awareness lingers on that loaf. Will it rise properly? Will it hold its shape? You do not know. You return to the table, though your thoughts remain partially with the oven. Your hands move through the next batch, but part of your attention listens for the subtle signs you have begun to recognize. The faint shift in sound, the quiet change in scent. Time passes, not measured, but felt. A lesser-known observation from some accounts suggests that experienced bakers developed a kind of quiet intuition about their work, sensing when something was not quite right, even before it became visible. You begin to understand that now. You move back to the oven, open the door. The heat flows outward, familiar and steady. You reach in, lift the loaves. One by one, the uneven one emerges last. You set it down. Look, it has held. Not perfectly, but well enough. You feel a small release in your chest. Not relief exactly, but something close. You arrange the loaves on the table, spacing them carefully. The differences between them are subtle, but you see them clearly now. Each one carries the mark of its making, the small variations that come from each movement of your hands. You step back, your breath steady, your body tired. but your attention's sharp. The apprentice glances at the loaves, then at you. You give a slight nod. It is enough. He returns to his work. The woman adjusts the cloths once more, her movements as precise as ever. The master baker stands near the oven, his posture unchanged, his presence steady. The bakehouse continues, calm, unbroken. You return to the table, your hands lowering into the dough again. Press, fold, turn. The rhythm carries you forward, even as the light softens, even as the day begins its quiet descent. The light in the doorway lowers further, stretching longer across the floor, touching places it did not reach before. It feels quieter now, not because the world outside has stopped, but because the day has begun to settle into itself. Inside the bakehouse continues its steady pulse. You stand at the table again, your hands moving through the dough with a familiarity that now feels almost complete. The motions no longer require thought. They move through you, guided by repetition, by memory, by the quiet understanding you have built over the hours. Press, fold, turn. The rhythm remains, but something else lingers beneath it. A subtle awareness of risk. The oven burns as it always has, its heat steady, its presence constant. Yet you have begun to notice how much depends on it. Everything you do leads to that fire, and everything that comes from it carries its mark. You glance toward it, not with fear, but with respect. A widely accepted fact about medieval bakehouses is that fire was both essential and dangerous. Buildings made of timber tools worn from use and constant heat created conditions where accidents could happen quickly sometimes, with devastating consequences. You feel that possibility now. Quiet, but real. The master baker moves closer to the oven, his attention sharper again, though not urgent. He adjusts the fire with careful movement, shifting wood, ensuring balance. His actions are precise, controlled, practiced over years you can only imagine. You watch briefly, then return to your work. The apprentice carries a small bundle of wood, setting it down near the oven. His movements are careful, more deliberate than earlier, as if he too feels the weight of what this fire represents. He steps back, waits. The master nods. A simple exchange, but meaningful. You shape another set of loaves, your hands steady despite the fatigue that now sits deeply in your arms. The dough responds as expected, though your movements are slower, more measured. There is no rush now, only continuation. There is an unusual detail recorded in some accounts that bakers often kept water or sand nearby to manage small flare-ups, though larger fires could quickly spread beyond control. These precautions were simple but necessary in a place where flame was constant. You notice a bucket near the wall, filled, ready. You had not paid attention to it before. Now you do. A quiet reminder. You carry the next batch toward the oven. The heat meets you again, though it feels different now, not in intensity but in awareness. You open the door, placing the loaves inside with practiced care. The warmth wraps around you, pressing against your skin, familiar yet never entirely comfortable. You close the door, step back, wait. The process continues, but your attention lingers on the fire. The way it moves, the way it shifts, the small sounds it makes as wood settles and burns. You listen. Not out of curiosity, but necessity. A continuing discussion among historians considers how often accidental fires occurred in medieval towns, particularly in areas where trades relied heavily on open flame. Some suggest that such incidents were relatively common, while others argue that experienced craftsmen developed careful habits that reduced risk. You begin to understand those habits, the constant attention, the careful adjustments, the quiet awarenesses that never fully fade. The apprentice steps closer to the oven, watching the door as if trying to understand what happens within. You recognize that feeling again, though it has changed. It is no longer only curiosity, it is responsibility. You return to the table, preparing another batch. Your hands move automatically, though your awareness remains divided, part of it always tuned to the presence of the fire behind you. Press, fold, turn. The rhythm continues, but it is layered now. The dough, the heat, the space between them. A lesser-known note from certain sources suggests that experienced bakers could sense when an oven was too hot or too cool simply by standing near it, feeling the heat on their skin. You test that now, not conscious, but naturally. You step slightly closer, pause, then adjust your movements accordingly. You carry another batch to the oven. Open, place, close. The sequence remains unchanged, but your understanding of it has deepened. You step back, your hands resting briefly at your sides. The room feels quieter now, though the fire continues its steady work, the oven holding its heat, the bread transforming within. The apprentice returns to the table, his movements slower but more careful. The woman adjusts the cloths once more, her tasks never fully complete. The master stands near the oven, his presence steady, his attention constant. The bakehouse continues, balanced, controlled. You return to the table once more, your hands lowering into the dough, your body moving with the rhythm that has carried you through the day. Press, fold, turn. The fire burns, the bread rises, and you remain within the quiet tension that holds it all together. The light in the doorway fades into a softer tone, no longer stretching sharply across the floor, but settling into a gentle glow that lingers without urgency. The street outside continues, though its sounds have quieted the earlier movement, thinning into something slower, more spaced apart. Inside the bakehouse begins to shift, not stopping, but winding inward. You stand at the table, your hands resting for a brief moment against the worn wood. The surface feels solid beneath your palms, familiar now in a way it was not at the beginning of the day. Every mark, every groove, every faint trace of flour has become part of something you recognize. You exhale slowly, not out of exhaustion alone, but out of awareness. The day is nearing its end. A widely accepted pattern in medieval trades is that work did not simply stop at sunset, but gradually transitioned into tasks of preparation, cleaning, and accounting. The visible labour faded, but the quieter responsibilities remained. You feel that transition now. The urgency of baking has passed. What remains is care. You begin gathering the remaining tools, setting them in order. Wooden boards are brushed clean, though they never lose the faint dusting of flour that seems to settle into everything. Bowls are wiped, not polished, but cleared enough for the next day's use. The apprentice works beside you, his movements slower now, but still attentive. He gathers smaller items, stacking them carefully, placing each one where it belongs. There is a shared understanding here. The work is not finished. It has only changed. The woman moves through the space, collecting cloths that have been used throughout the day. She shakes them lightly, releasing a soft cloud of flour into the air before folding them with a practiced precision. Each motion is calm, deliberate. The master baker stands near a small table at the side, his attention focused on a different task now. Coins are placed in front of him, arranged in small groups, counted, then set aside. His movements are steady, unhurried, as if this part of the work requires as much care as any other. You glance briefly in his direction, then return to your own task. There is a small but telling detail found in some historical records that bakers often kept careful track of their daily earnings, balancing the cost of grain, fuel, and labour against what was earned from selling bread. Even in a simple trade, the balance had to be maintained. You begin to understand that. The bread leaves your hands, the coins return, and both must be accounted for. You carry a small stack of unused wood toward its place near the oven, setting it down carefully. The fire has been allowed to settle, no longer burning with the same intensity as before, but still alive, still holding warmth for what will come next. It is never fully extinguished, not if it can be helped. There is an interesting note in some sources suggesting that bakers often preserved a small amount of heat in their ovens overnight to make the next morning's work easier. The fire, like the work itself, continued in a quieter form. You glance at the embers. They glow faintly, steady, waiting. You return to the table, wiping your hands once more against your apron. The fabric is heavy with the day marked by flour, heat, and movement. It tells its own story, one that does not need to be spoken. Your shoulders ache more noticeably now. The weight of the hours has settled fully into your body, but there is a different feeling beneath it. Completion. Not perfect. Not total, but enough. There is a continuing line of thought among historians that daily labour in this period was shaped as much by routine as by necessity. The repetition of tasks created a structure that guided each day from beginning to end. You feel that structure now. You have moved through it, from darkness to light, from first fire to final embers. The apprentice pauses briefly, his hands resting at his sides. He looks around the bakehouse as if seeing it differently now that the pace has slowed. You recognize that look, the shift from doing to noticing. He takes a breath, then returns to his task. The woman finishes folding the last cloth, placing it neatly with the others. She steps back, her gaze moving over the room, checking, confirming that everything is as it should be. Nothing left undone, or at least nothing that cannot wait. The master baker gathers the coins, placing them into a small container, then setting it aside. He looks toward the oven, then toward the table, then briefly toward you. A small nod. Not large, not dramatic, but meaningful. You return it with your own small movement. Acknowledgement. You carry one last item to its place, setting it down with care. The room feels different now. Not empty, but quieter, as if the energy of the day has settled into the walls, into the floor, into the tools themselves. You stand still for a moment, just a moment, your breath steady, your body aware of everything it has done. There is still work ahead. Tomorrow waits, but for now this part of the discourse day is complete. You lower your hands from the table, step back, and let the quiet settle around you. The room grows quieter still, though not silent. There is always a faint presence here, the soft settling of wood, the gentle breath of warmth that lingers in the oven, the distant echo of a town that never fully sleeps. You remain where you are for a moment, not working, not moving, simply standing within the space that has carried you through the day. Your hands rest lightly at your sides, no longer pressing into dough, no longer guiding shape or weight. They feel different now, tired yes, but also changed in a way that is difficult to describe. The memory of each motion still lingers in them, as if the rhythm has not yet fully released you. You flex your fingers once, slowly. They respond, but more heavily than before. You take a breath. The air feels warmer than outside, though softer now, no longer pressing, no longer demanding. It holds the scent of bread smoke and something quieter beneath it, something settled. A widely recognized truth about long-practiced trades is that they shape not only skill but the body and mind of the person who performs them. Over time, movements become instinct, posture shifts, and the rhythm of the work becomes part of daily thought. You feel the beginning of that now. Not but present. The apprentice moves quietly near the back, finishing the last small tasks, his earlier energy replaced by a calm that mirrors your own. The woman has already stepped away from the centre of the room, her work complete for the day, though you know it will begin again tomorrow without announcement. The master baker stands near the oven, always near the oven. He looks at it not as something separate, but as something continuous, something that extends beyond a single day. His presence remains steady, his attention quiet, as if he's already thinking of the next cycle. You understand that now. The work does not end. It pauses. There is a small but telling observation found in certain accounts that bakers often measured their lives in cycles rather than in years. Each day repeating the same essential pattern, each movement reinforcing the one before it, until the distinction between days softened into continuity. You feel that pattern forming. Today has already begun to resemble tomorrow. You step toward the oven, not to work, just to stand near it. The warmth reaches you again, though it feels gentler now, less intense, more like a presence than a force. You look at the embers, their glow steady, quiet, patient. They will remain. Through the night, waiting, there is a reflective line of scholarly discussion that considers how such repetition influenced the way people understood time. Some suggest that it created a sense of stability, while others propose that it blurred the boundaries between one day and the next. You feel both, the comfort of knowing what comes, the weight of knowing it will come again. You turn slightly, looking across the bakehouse. The table, the tools, the marks left behind, everything is in place, everything ready. You step back. Your body moves more slowly now, not out of effort, but out of ease. The urgency has gone replaced by something softer, something that allows each movement to stretch a little longer. You walk toward the doorway. The light outside has faded further, the sky shifting toward evening. The air that reaches you now is cooler, carrying the quiet sounds of the town settling into its own rest. You pause at the threshold. Between inside and outside, between warmth and cool, Between work and rest, a lesser-known note from some accounts suggests that bakers often carried the scent of their work with them, the smell of bread and smoke lingering in their clothes, marking them even as they moved through the town. You notice it now. Faint, but present. You step outside, just a few paces. The ground feels the same beneath your feet, though the light has changed its appearance. The shapes are softer, the edges less defined. You take a breath. The air feels different here, lighter, freer, but also quieter. The town is slowing. As you are, you turn back towards the bakehouse. The doorway stands open, the faint glow from within spilling outward into the dimming street. It looks smaller now, more contained, yet it holds everything you have done today. You step back aside. The warmth welcomes you once more, though gently now, as if it too is settling. You move toward a place to rest. Not far, just enough. You lower yourself slowly, your body easing into stillness. The weight you have carried throughout the day begins to release, not all at once, but gradually, as if each part of you is letting go in its own time. Your breathing slows, even, unforced. The sounds around you fade into the background. The faint crackle of embers, a distant step, then less, then almost nothing. Your eyes grow heavier, not from strain, but from the quiet that has finally arrived. The rhythm of the day lingers for a moment longer. Press, fold, turn. Then it softens, fades, and slips gently away. You remain still, warm, at rest, and the bakehouse, like you, settles into the quiet, holding everything it has been without asking anything more. Sweet dreams in dreams.